What if I told you that immigration lawyers, Oxford professors, and one of the UK government's own former migration advisors just sat in front of Parliament and calmly dismantled the logic behind the biggest settlement reform in half a century? Not activists, not campaigners, not political commentators, experts the government itself relies on. And what they said about the proposed indefinite leave to remain changes should concern every skilled worker, every care worker, every dependent spouse, and every family building a future in the UK. Welcome back to GoUKGo. If you want to understand what these ILR proposals really mean, beyond the headlines, beyond the political spin, beyond carefully worded press releases, then stay with me, because today we're breaking down one of the most revealing parliamentary evidence sessions we've seen so far. This wasn't noise, this wasn't outrage. This was expert analysis, measured, data-driven, and deeply uncomfortable for policymakers. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why a $50,000 salary threshold may actually encourage wage suppression, why extending settlement timelines could unintentionally create conditions similar to Windrush, why care workers may face what MPs openly described as indentured employment, and why the group most devastatingly affected might not be who you think. Let's set the stage properly. A parliamentary committee invited 3 heavyweight experts to give evidence on the proposed changes. Nick Rawlinson, a senior immigration lawyer with decades of hands-on experience navigating the UK system. Professor Alan Manning, economist at the London School of Economics and former chair of the Migration Advisory Committee, the government's own advisory body. Dr. Madeline Sumption, director of the Migration Observatory at Oxford University and deputy chair of the MAC. These are not fringe voices. These are establishment experts. When the government wants independent evaluation of migration policy, these are the kinds of people it turns to. So what did they say? The first revelation was surprisingly basic, yet incredibly significant. When MPs asked what the government is actually trying to achieve with these settlement changes, one expert responded bluntly, "The consultation document does not clearly state its own objectives." Pause and think about that. We're talking about the most significant restructuring of settlement policy in 50 years, potentially affecting 1.6 million people. And the official consultation doesn't clearly articulate what the policy is trying to accomplish. That's not a minor oversight. That's foundational. The experts then attempted to reverse engineer what the government's goals appear to be. They identified 4 likely aims. First, selection, ensuring migrants remain in employment and contribute economically over time. Second, restriction, keeping people on temporary visas longer, including restricting access to welfare. Third, integration incentives, encouraging behaviors like higher earnings, employment, and language acquisition. Fourth, altering attractiveness, potentially making the UK less appealing to reduce migration numbers. Those are plausible objectives. On paper, they sound coherent. But here's where the expert critique became uncomfortable. When asked whether the proposed measures would actually achieve those goals, the answer, repeatedly, was unclear at best. Let's take integration incentives. The idea behind the $50,000 salary threshold for faster settlement is that high earners contribute more and should be rewarded with quicker access to ILR. But as Professor Manning explained, income isn't something people can simply choose. You can't just wake up tomorrow and decide to earn $50,000. You can't integrate harder and instantly jump salary bands. So if the criteria are based on factors individuals don't fully control, they don't function as true incentives. They function as filters. That's a critical distinction. An incentive changes behavior. A filter rewards those already positioned to qualify. And then came what might be the most explosive insight of the entire session. The $50,000 threshold could create a perverse incentive for employers. Here's how. Imagine a worker earning $49,000. If their employer gives them a pay rise to $51,000, that worker qualifies for faster settlement. Once settled, they're free. They can switch employers without sponsorship, they can negotiate more aggressively, they can leave, but if the employer keeps them just below $50,000, the worker remains tied to sponsorship longer. They remain dependent. So what does that mean in practice? It means the policy designed to reward high earners may incentivize some employers to suppress wages deliberately. Let that sink in. A system meant to reward contribution could unintentionally encourage pay stagnation. And this isn't political rhetoric, It's labor market economics. When employment mobility increases, employers face more competition. When mobility is restricted, leverage shifts toward the employer. The expert wasn't speculating emotionally. He was analyzing incentives structurally. Now let's talk about retrospective application, because this is where fairness comes sharply into focus. The immigration lawyer was asked directly, is it fair to apply these new rules to people who came under a 5-year settlement promise? His answer was clear. I don't think it's fair. He acknowledged it might not be unlawful, but fairness is a different question. Historically, when the UK has changed immigration rules, those already on a route have usually been protected. Spouse visas extended from 1 year to 2, then to 5, but transitional protections applied. Entrepreneur visas closed, investor visas closed, Tier 1 general closed, but sunset clauses allowed those already in the system to complete their path. The one major exception was in 2006 when settlement moved from 4 to 5 years, and even then, legal challenges followed. So if these new proposals are applied retrospectively, significant legal challenges are likely. But the most sobering moment came when the lawyer raised a historical parallel: Windrush. He warned that extending sponsorship dependency to 10 or even 15 years creates structural vulnerability. Here's why. If a sponsored worker loses their job, they now have 60 days, sometimes less, to secure a new sponsor. If they fail, they fall out of status. Under the proposed reforms, falling out of status could mean facing a 20-year route back to settlement. That's not theoretical. That's systemic fragility. People who entered legally, worked legally, paid taxes for years, suddenly undocumented, not through wrongdoing, but because the system created a narrow bottleneck. Windrush wasn't caused by people acting unlawfully. It was caused by administrative rigidity intersecting with human reality. And the experts warned that similar structural risks exist if settlement pathways become excessively prolonged. Now let's discuss care workers. An MP described the proposed 15-year pathway for care workers as indentured employment. Strong language, but the experts didn't reject it. Care workers already operate in a sector with historically low pay and high demand. If settlement requires remaining in sponsored employment for up to 15 years, mobility is heavily constrained. Employers know workers are tied. Workers know leaving risks status. That dynamic can create vulnerability. The economist's broader point was simple but powerful. Immigration policy cannot fix structural underpayment in the care sector. If wages were competitive, domestic workers would fill many roles. If wages remain suppressed, reliance on tied international labor continues. He referenced Canada's caregiver program, where only around 10 to 15% of entrants remain in care roles long-term once they gain permanent status. Why? Because when people gain freedom, they move toward better opportunities. If the UK extends dependency periods without addressing pay, we may simply delay, not solve, turnover dynamics. But here's the group that could face the most widespread disruption: dependents. Under the proposals, spouses may need to meet mandatory work requirements to qualify for settlement. For families where one parent has stepped back to raise children, this changes everything. Childcare costs in the UK are among the highest in Europe. Returning to full-time work may not be economically rational, but under a mandatory work condition, it may become legally necessary. The lawyer estimated that between 1/3 and half of adult dependents are not currently working. That's potentially hundreds of thousands of individuals facing new uncertainty. And the ripple effects extend to children. If one parent qualifies earlier than another due to salary differences or employment status, children's immigration timelines fragment. Access to home student fees, citizenship eligibility, stability during formative years. A child growing up in a family trapped in prolonged immigration limbo experiences uncertainty that shapes educational and psychological outcomes. This is not abstract policy. This is lived experience. Then came another quietly alarming observation. Looking at existing 10-year settlement routes, the economist noted that far fewer people are emerging with ILR than originally entered. People are entering long routes and disappearing from the data. Some may leave the UK, others may fall into irregular status, but the government does not fully understand why completion rates appear lower than expected, and yet the proposal dramatically expands long settlement pathways without resolving that mystery. In policy design, that's a red flag. When evidence suggests friction in long routes, expanding those routes requires robust justification. So, what did this entire session reveal? It revealed that the consultation lacks clarity about its objectives. It revealed that salary thresholds may distort labor incentives. It revealed fairness concerns about retrospective application. It revealed structural vulnerability risks resembling past administrative failures. It revealed exploitation risks in low-paid sectors. It revealed significant consequences for dependents and children. And perhaps most importantly, it revealed that the experts advising Parliament are not confident these proposals achieve their stated aims. Now let's zoom out. Governments design immigration systems, balancing economics, politics, public perception, and administrative practicality. But good policy depends on alignment between intention and outcome. If a policy seeks contribution, it must measure controllable contribution. If it seeks integration, it must incentivize behaviors within individual agency. If it seeks restriction, it must account for unintended consequences. And if it seeks deterrence, it must assess comparative global competitiveness. Because here's another point raised. Countries like the UAE and Singapore offer far less generous settlement pathways, yet continue attracting large migrant workforces. Settlement timelines alone may not significantly alter migration flows. Economic opportunity, wage levels, and labor demand matter more. So where does this leave international workers? In a period of uncertainty, consultation responses are pending, the government's formal reply is expected. Legal challenges may emerge. Transitional protections remain unclear. But one thing is certain. When immigration lawyers, LSE economists, and Oxford migration scholars independently highlight structural weaknesses in a proposal, that deserves attention. Not panic, not outrage. Attention. At GoUKGo, our goal is clarity, not speculation, not fear. Clarity. Because informed individuals make better decisions. So here's what you should do. Stay updated on the government's formal response. Review how transitional arrangements are framed. Assess whether retrospective application is confirmed. Understand how dependent work requirements are defined. And if you're currently on a route to settlement, consult qualified advisors early, not reactively. Immigration systems are complex ecosystems. Small rule changes ripple widely. And while policy debates happen in Parliament, real lives unfold in homes, workplaces, and schools across the country. This conversation isn't about ideology. It's about structural design. It's about incentives. It's about predictability. And it's about whether the path you were told existed still leads where you were promised. If this breakdown helped you see the bigger picture behind the headlines, make sure you subscribe to GoUKGo. Turn on notifications, because as soon as the government publishes its formal response, we'll analyze it, line by line, through an expert lens. Drop a comment and tell me which part concerns you most: the wage suppression risk, the Windrush structural warning, the impact on families, or the unexplained data gaps in long settlement routes. And most importantly, share this with anyone navigating the UK immigration system right now, because knowledge doesn't change policy overnight, but it changes how prepared you are for what comes next. Until the next breakdown, stay informed, stay strategic, and remember, when the experts quietly raise concerns in Parliament, it's worth listening carefully. This is GoUKGo, and we'll keep analyzing what matters.